A lot of new horror games have been revealed, but only a few really catch attention. From next-level visuals to tense atmospheres and a solid story. Here are the top 20 new horror games that will break the internet. Project Retrograde is a third-person horror shooter that mixes sci-fi, survival, and horror, and it really feels close to something like Resident Evil. The story takes place after a failed experiment meant to save humanity. Instead, it leads to the rise of a parasite that takes over everything it touches. You play as a survivor who gets infected but doesn't fully lose control, which puts you in a strange position where you're both fighting the threat and slowly becoming part of it. Gameplay leans into shooting mixed with survival mechanics. You manage resources, fight off infected enemies, and use abilities that come from the parasite itself. The more you rely on those powers, the more it starts affecting you. So there's always that risk behind every decision. If it delivers on what it's showing so far, this could be a really interesting mix of horror, action, and RPG systems.
Nice work, Hunter.
Yeah, I got it done. But I don't know, is that me or him?
Find that surface agent. She can help.
What's the target?
Sean Anderson. He's behind the recent mutation.
And they sent you in alone?
That's not relevant to you. Follow me, and don't die.
But perhaps we can come to an arrangement.
What do you want from me?
Clive Barker's Hellraiser is an upcoming first-person horror game based on the Hellraiser universe, and it already looks way darker and more intense than most horror games out there. From the trailer alone, it leans heavily into that disturbing, brutal style the series is known for. Gameplay mixes survival horror with action. You'll be using both weapons and the power of the puzzle box to fight enemies, including cult members and creatures from hell. There's also a balance between combat and survival, so you're not just shooting everything, you still have to manage situations carefully. The story follows Aiden, who ends up opening a mysterious puzzle box that pulls his girlfriend into a nightmare realm known as the Labyrinth. From there, everything turns into a rescue mission where you're dealing with cults, twisted creatures, and the iconic Cenobites led by Pinhead. MINSK takes a different approach by putting you in control of a robot instead of a human. The world is covered in a toxic fog that has wiped out most life, leaving behind empty cities that feel quiet but dangerous at the same time. You're sent into these zones to gather resources and help what's left of humanity survive. Gameplay leans into scavenging and survival decisions. You explore ruined locations, collect resources, and deal with hostile threats along the way. Inventory and supplies matter, so you can't just fight everything. Some encounters are better avoided, especially when resources start running low. From recent updates, the game is still in development with no confirmed release date yet, but it already has a Steam page and has gone through playtesting phases with new areas being added over time. Halloween brings that classic slasher vibe into a modern horror game, putting you in suburban areas where you're never really safe. You're either trying to survive the night, or you're the one hunting everyone down as Michael Myers. Gameplay follows the asymmetrical style. One player controls the killer, while the others play as survivors trying to escape. Survivors rely on stealth, hiding, and working together to complete objectives and find a way out. The killer, on the other hand, tracks them down, controls the pace, and looks for the right moment to strike. You're not really fighting back as a survivor, so it's all about positioning, timing, and staying aware of your surroundings. As Michael Myers, it's slower and more methodical. You're not rushing in, you're watching, waiting, then moving in when they least expect it. Aphelion builds its tension around a survival situation in deep space, where isolation becomes just as dangerous as whatever is out there with you. It follows astronauts from a broken mission, trying to stay alive after crashing on a frozen alien planet, with communication and any chance of escape slowly falling apart. Gameplay leans into survival and exploration. Movement feels slow and deliberate, resources are limited, and every decision carries weight. You're not rushing from one fight to another. Most of the time, you're navigating unknown areas, managing oxygen and supplies, and reacting to things that show up when you least expect it. What makes it stand out is the mix between realistic sci-fi and psychological pressure. It's not just about dealing with threats, it's also about isolation, failing systems, and that constant feeling that no one is coming to help.
The Hope 1 shuttle has crashed on Persephone. I lost contact with Dr. Montclair.
Hang on, Thomas. I got this.
Oh, shit.
I'm not alone.
What the hell?
It's still...
Cinder City goes for a large-scale third-person shooter set in a ruined version of Seoul, mixing military combat with some sci-fi and horror elements. The world feels messy in a good way. Abandoned areas, strange creatures, and bigger threats all happening at the same time while you're just trying to stay alive. Gameplay leans into tactical shooting with some MMO-style features. You can play solo or with a squad, use different weapons, and move around with vehicles like bikes or even helicopters. It's not just small encounters either. You're dealing with bigger fights, including mechs and mutated enemies, sometimes with multiple players in the same space. From what's been shown, it's aiming for a 2026 release on PC and consoles. It's built on Unreal Engine 5, with a focus on large open areas and multiplayer. So it looks like the kind of game that's built around scale more than anything else.
Liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. The last, much the easiest to bestow. We knew that before the bacterium emptied the towns and cities. Before the herds were driven into the water.
Hunger takes a different direction by mixing extraction shooter gameplay with horror, set in a dark version of Napoleonic Europe, where a mysterious plague has completely destroyed society. The world feels brutal and unpredictable, with ruined cities, infected creatures, and other survivors all competing to stay alive. Gameplay is built around a PvPvE extraction loop. You head into dangerous areas, look for resources, deal with enemies, and try to get out before things go bad. It's not just the environment you have to worry about either. Other players can turn on you at any moment, so there's always that extra layer of tension. Combat gives you options. You've got ranged weapons, but also heavier melee fights that can get pretty intense up close. How you handle each encounter really depends on your playstyle and what situation you walk into.
In a world where there are no rules, the only law that matters is a loaded gun.
Go ahead, make my day.
job is not about taking somebody's life. It's about taking their souls.
Money for blood. That's peculiar profession.
Sometimes I kill for money.
Exekiller already stands out just from its setting. It mixes a post-apocalyptic world with a Western feel and some cyberpunk elements, so it doesn't really play like a typical shooter. You're in a version of Earth that's been wiped out by a massive disaster. You play as a bounty hunter known as an Exekiller, tracking targets across this harsh world. Most of your work revolves around hunting people tied to special biochips, and how you deal with those targets can change how things play out. Gameplay is first-person and pretty open in how you approach it. You can go loud, stay quiet, or even try to talk your way through certain moments depending on the mission. The world itself is semi-open, with hubs connected by long stretches of land, and you'll be using vehicles to get around, which adds to that lone bounty hunter feel. Nakwon Last Paradise brings a different kind of zombie horror by focusing on stealth, survival, and human tension. The whole game is set in a ruined version of Seoul, where guns are rare, noise is dangerous, and even one mistake can get you killed. It mixes third-person shooting with PvPvE extraction gameplay. You go into the city at night to scavenge resources, then try to escape alive while dealing with infected and other players who might betray you. Shooting isn't always the best option. Even a single gunshot can attract a swarm, so stealth and timing matter a lot. There's also a strong survival loop outside of combat. During the day, you manage your shelter, craft items, and prepare for the next run. Every decision matters, because if you die during an expedition, you can lose everything you collected. Resonance of Plague Tale Legacy already looks like a real shift for the series. Instead of following Amicia and Hugo, this one focuses on a new perspective. You play as Sophia, a smuggler trying to uncover her past, set years before the events of the previous games. The story takes you to a place known as the Minotaur's Island, a location filled with ancient ruins, hidden secrets, and something much darker tied to an old curse. Gameplay is where things change the most. Earlier games were heavily stealth-focused, but this time it's more combat-driven. Sophia is faster, more capable, and can actually fight back with parries and close-range attacks. One of the more interesting ideas is how the game uses two timelines. You switch between different time periods, and what happens in the past can affect the present. Remothered, Red Nun's Legacy leans heavily into classic survival horror, with that old-school feeling where you're constantly being hunted instead of fighting back. The whole setting feels tense and personal, taking place in a decaying mansion tied to a series of disappearances where every corner hides something disturbing. Gameplay focuses on stealth, evasion, and survival under pressure. You're being chased by stalker-type enemies, so hiding, timing, and understanding the environment matter more than direct combat. There are also new mechanics like hypnosis, where you can interact with objects to reveal hidden memories or uncover new paths. adding another layer to exploration. From the latest info, the game is set to release in 2026 for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch 2, and PC, and it's being built as the final chapter of the trilogy.
What are we willing to do to save our children?
The bodies of 4 of the previously reported missing have been found.
Project Vesperi leans more into a cinematic, choice-driven horror experience where every decision actually changes what happens next. Instead of focusing on action, it puts you in tense situations where you decide who survives, who doesn't, and how everything plays out. Gameplay is built around branching decisions and multiple endings. Conversations, small actions, and even how you react under pressure can completely change the story. It's more like an interactive movie where you're constantly shaping the outcome instead of just following a fixed path. You play as Dr. Evelyn Roth, an astrobiologist sent to investigate a possible sign of life. But once an intruder appears inside the station, the situation turns into a mix of survival and psychological tension, where your choices decide who lives, who dies, and how the story ends.
The military has nothing to do with this. This is a scientific discovery.
I think I found something.
Hand it over, Doctor.
UNMe leans heavily into psychological horror, but in a way that feels more abstract and unsettling instead of relying on typical scares. The whole experience revolves around a girl trapped inside a mental labyrinth, where her body is shared by multiple souls, and each one is trying to take control. Gameplay is built around choice and shifting identity. Each soul has its own personality, trauma, and abilities, and they can take over at different moments, changing how you interact with the world. You're not just exploring, you're constantly dealing with unstable control, where your perspective and options can shift without warning. There's also a strong focus on dialogue and decision-making. You can interact with each soul, uncover their past, and eventually decide which ones to keep or erase. Those choices directly affect the outcome, so it's not just story, it's the core of the gameplay itself.
とにかくイライラしてそれどころじゃないんだって。私が私であること、私が誰よりも分かってる。そんなことありえますか？さっさと他のやつを消せ。
Hunter the Reckoning Deathwish goes for a grounded horror approach where monsters aren't in some distant world. They're hiding in plain sight inside a normal city. You're living in New York, but behind everyday people, there are vampires, werewolves, and things way worse. As things unfold, you're pulled into that hidden world and forced to become a hunter just to survive. Gameplay mixes first-person shooting with RPG systems and investigation. You're not just running around killing enemies. You gather clues, track targets, and decide how to deal with them. You can infiltrate, threaten, or go straight into combat, and your choices actually affect how missions play out. There's also a strong focus on character building and decisions. You create your own hunter, choose skills, manage your safe house, and build relationships with other characters. every choice matters, and even your allies can influence how things end.
You never know what it will be. The thing that changes you forever. The danger no one else sees. Lurking in the shadows. Waiting for its prey.
Shaw took control. There's nothing here.
The Twilight Project brings a different kind of horror by using Southeast Asian folklore as its core, which already gives it a unique tone. The game is set in a remote Thai village that looks quiet at first, but once night hits, everything starts to change, and the danger becomes real. You're not just wandering around, you're trying to survive while uncovering what happened to this place. The deeper you go, the more you realize the village is tied to something supernatural, and it's not going to let you leave easily. Gameplay follows a third-person survival style. During the day, you explore, gather resources, and prepare. At night, it shifts into survival mode, where creatures come out and you have to rely on planning, positioning, and whatever you managed to collect earlier. There's also some strategy involved. You can set up safe areas, manage your resources, and decide how to approach each night instead of just reacting to everything. The Pines leans into a mix of psychological horror and RPG systems, which already makes it feel a bit different from typical horror games. Instead of just surviving, you're dealing with people, choices, and consequences inside a quiet town that slowly starts to feel wrong. You play as a detective who comes to this place looking for peace after a failed case. Gameplay gives you a lot of freedom. You can investigate clues, talk to characters, or go into combat depending on how you want to approach things. There's also a choice system that affects not just your story, but the people around you, so decisions actually change how things play out. One of the more interesting mechanics is the stalker system. If you push too far, trust the wrong person, or make bad decisions, certain characters can turn into something that actively hunts you later on. So the game remembers what you do, and it can come back to punish you.
Well, Mr. Walker, we both know you have your issues.
Do you feel worthless?
Well, hello.
Beautiful Light goes for a mix of tactical shooter and horror, but the way it handles tension feels very different. Instead of scripted scares, most of the pressure comes from real players, limited resources, and the risk of losing everything if things go wrong. Gameplay is built around a PvPvPvE extraction system. You go in with your squad, search for artifacts, deal with other players, and survive against creatures in the area. The main loop is simple. Get in, secure the objective, and get out alive. But if you die, you lose all your gear, which makes every decision feel important. One thing that makes it more intense is the asymmetrical system. Some players can actually take control of anomalies and hunt others, so you're not just fighting AI or squads, you're being tracked by something unpredictable. It creates that constant feeling that you're never really safe. Alkahest goes in a different direction by focusing on physics-based combat and interaction, where the environment matters just as much as your weapon. Instead of just swinging a sword, you can kick enemies off cliffs, drop objects on them, or use whatever is around you to survive. It feels closer to games like Dark Messiah, where every fight can play out differently depending on how you use the world. The setting is a grounded medieval world with a darker tone. You're not playing a chosen hero, just someone trying to prove themselves in a world full of conflict between factions while dealing with threats like goblin raids and political tension. Gameplay mixes first-person combat with immersive sim elements. You can approach situations in different ways, go aggressive, use stealth, or combine tools creatively. One of the main systems is alchemy instead of magic, letting you craft potions, weapon effects, or even unpredictable outcomes depending on how you use them. OD feels less like a traditional game and more like an experimental horror experience. It's being directed by Hideo Kojima with involvement from Jordan Peele, which already tells you this isn't going to follow a normal formula. Instead of focusing on clear gameplay systems, everything shown so far leans into psychological fear and immersion. The idea behind the project is exploring how much fear a player can handle, almost like pushing you to overdose on fear itself. The teaser gives off strong PT-style vibes, with slow movement, realistic character reactions, and small details like sound and facial expressions doing most of the work. It feels more like you're inside a scene rather than playing a typical game, and that's intentional. There's also a big focus on blending film and gameplay. Kojima has described it as something closer to a new form of media, not just a standard horror game, which is why details about mechanics are still very unclear. Silent Hill Townfall brings a different direction to the franchise by focusing more on psychological horror and narrative tension instead of traditional combat-heavy gameplay. The story is set in a fog-covered Scottish coastal town called St. Amelia, where a man named Simon Ordell wakes up with no clear memory of how he got there, only to be pulled into something deeply unsettling tied to the town's past. Gameplay is shifting toward a first-person perspective, making exploration and encounters feel more personal and closer to the player. Instead of constant action, the game leans on investigation, survival moments, and tools like a CRTV device that helps uncover signals, threats, and hidden information in the environment. A big part of the design is how the game builds tension through audio and atmosphere. The sound system is dynamic, meaning music and ambient noise can shift based on what you do or what's happening around you.
I know this is going to be hard, but you have to come back to me. Come back to me, Simon.
I woke up in the water again. But this time it's different.